Welcome to our panel today entitled The Bold and Brave, AAPI Leadership in Local Government. My name is Early Peng. I'm a first-year MPP student alongside my friend and colleague Aisha Islam, who sadly couldn't make it today. We're both AAPI student fellows at the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. I wanted to start off with a few announcements and housekeeping. Firstly, the Ash Center would like to acknowledge the land on which Harvard sits as the traditional territory of the Massachusetts people and a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. This panel is co-sponsored by the Rajawali Foundation Institute for Asia, the Rappaport Institute of Greater Boston, the Tallman Center for State and Local Government, and the AAPI Caucus. This panel is being recorded and the video will be shared on the Ash Center YouTube page. During the Q&A session, should you like to make a remark or ask questions, please wait until a mic gets to you before speaking. This just ensures that the viewers watching the recording can hear your question. Today, we are so fortunate to have with us Mayor Sokhary Chau of Lowell, Massachusetts, who is the first Cambodian American mayor in the United States, as well as our moderator, Professor Justin Benedictis-Kessner, Assistant Professor of Public Policy and faculty affiliate at both the Ash Center and the Tallman Center. So without further ado, please welcome Mayor Chau and Professor Benedictis-Kessner.
That's better. I'm really honored to be here, and thank you, Early Peng and the professor and the organization that welcomed me here today. This is a very impressive group here. And I have to tell you, I spoke to a couple of US ambassadors to Cambodia, some leaders from all over the country, and I conduct a few meetings at City Hall a few times a week, but I don't get as nervous as today. So, there must be something going right here. But thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you, Mayor Chau. I will say I also sometimes get nervous around Harvard students. Don't worry. So I was wondering if you could start us off, and Mayor Chau, could you tell us a little bit about your background and maybe sort of what led you to pursue a career in public service and then running for mayor?
Thank you. That's a much more difficult question than you might think. And also, Professor, I forgot to mention, you really have a cool initial, Professor DBK. That's a type of professor you want to have as well. I'm Cambodian American. I was born in a small village in Cambodia. And in Cambodia, because it's a small country, you only have a one major city, Phnom Penh, which is the capital, and all the other regions are called provinces or villages. And the province has multiple villages, and the province I came from is called Battambang. And Battambang is well known for the number one crop is rice. And it's an agrarian society. Everybody are farmers in the province. And my family were from a generation that were actually rice farmers and orange farmers until the war happened in the 1960s and 1970s. And my father became a soldier because you have to pretty much have to fight and defend your village from the rising communist, the Khmer Rouge. And as you know, like Rouge is red, which is for communist color back then. And we moved to a bigger quote unquote city in Battambang. And in 1975, as you all have heard before, if you were educated, if you wore glasses, if you were a business person, leaders of any kind, if you look different, you were executed. And if you were well known, like some people, like my father was well known among his enemies, of course, because he went to war with them all the time. So he was one of the first executed. And my mom was left with 7 children. I'm the youngest of 7. So chaotic is probably an understatement. You were moved from your home into other parts of the countryside. And pretty much the older people, they were enslaved to work in the mines, to work in the field. And in 1979, we were able, when the Vietnamese troops um, came into the country, ousted out the Khmer Rouge, we were able to, through my mom, I'm making my story short a little bit, but she was an amazing woman. She was uneducated, growing up in the village at that time, and she came from a big family as well. And she was the eldest of in her family. So two things: women were not encouraged to get education, and if you grow up on the farms, you were more encouraged if you're female to take care of the family, where the boys and the men were encouraged to work, to use their hands to work on the farm. Very much like a European feudal system, farming system back in the old days. Farming and a way of life was much more important. But my mom, through her courage, she kept all 7 kids alive through daily killings and manipulations and tortures by the Khmer Rouge, but we were able to go to Thailand border, and then we entered the Thailand refugee camps. And after that, we were sponsored by the Catholic Church to come to a suburb in Pittsburgh, a suburb of Pennsylvania. And of course, we did not know the name. We only researched the name of the town much later when we began to learn how to read and write English. But we were sponsored by the Catholic Church, literally by the convent. And so we actually lived with the nuns who wore the uniforms, their habits. So right away we learned to we adapt to praying. When we saw the statue of Mary and the crucifixion, we prayed every day. We go to church every Sunday. We went to a parochial school. Long story short, it took about 3 years, 4 years actually, before we came to Lowell, Lowell, Massachusetts, which is, if some of you here are not from Massachusetts, it's about 30 miles north of Boston, and it is an immigrant city, has a long history of different immigrant groups arriving in Lowell, and like many other immigrants, many other Southeast Asian immigrants, especially Cambodian, we came to Lowell. My older siblings came to Lowell just because of the unskilled labor market in the middle 1980s and the late 80s. There were a lot of manufacturing, assembly line, from making clothes hangers to beds to other gadgets. So it's not the computer chips, it's not the technology assembly line that you know today. It's changed a lot. The industry around Lowell along 128. But that's why many Cambodians decide to come to Lowell. Some Cambodian immigrants, some of them went to California, either by choice or by sponsorship. And it's nice weather. It's very close to Asia. It's hot. It's warm. It's nice. But you can't really get a good job from the stories that we heard. They can be working in the strawberry fields, much more intensive labor than here on the East Coast. And many of the Cambodian immigrants, when they came to Lowell, they would work long hours. They don't think of it as overtime work. They work as long as they can because for once in their lives, they got paid versus working for free or being enslaved. So they got paid good wage. They able to have a good apartment to live in, buy food. So I remember like all the older people, they just work all the time. So what that meant was, it's positive and negatives. While the older siblings or the parents work, so they left a lot of young kids at home, right? Left them to their own device pretty much. And in 1980s, and even as late as 1990s, there were not many social service programs to help with the newly arrived immigrants. We didn't even, the city didn't even know much about the immigrant groups coming in. And they were great, the teachers, the social workers, they did all they can to support individually what they can because there was no funding for social service programs yet at that time. All volunteer based, but going back to the kids, they would get into a lot of troubles, too much time on their hands. There were a lot of gang issues among the Asian communities at that time, the 1980s and early 1990s. And of course, a lot of things changed, and the um, Southeast Asian immigrants in Lowell, over time, they were able to buy houses, open businesses, and we start having an interest in representing ourselves. I'm sort of a late bloomers, actually. I came to the game a little bit late. There were a couple other Cambodian politicians that ran successfully in Lowell. And I helped them on each of their campaign. Come out of college, I was like very idealistic. I just want to make sure that we have representation in the city to represent all of us. And of course, our population growth, the Southeast Asian population grow to now about 25%, and the dynamics and the children who were born here now they're adults, or kids like myself here who came here when we were either babies, 8 or 9 years old, or young teenagers. They become adults, have a family. So a lot of interest, a lot of personalities change in the city, and I felt that the leadership wasn't reflecting this group of people. I felt like I'm in the middle. I'm an immigrant, but I also like to think I'm American as well. So this really is there's a gap, there's an understanding between many Asian American, and I could extend that to every member of the AAPI group because I think we all feel somewhat in the middle. We're not 100% American, and from talking to some of my friends who born here, even after a couple generations, we have a strong culture, a strong history, something in our DNA, personality, and so forth. So uh, strong connection to our Asian, to our AAPI history, culture, ancestors, family, ways of life, personalities. But also we have to really succeed in America, in the United States. So I felt like that I kind of be able to connect the dots between our group and the rest of the mainstream society. And I felt that, especially in the city of Lowell, even at the local level, there wasn't that type of representation. So I decided to run for city council. I lost the first term actually. I ran in 2017, and each term is 2 years. I lost by 150 votes, so that was heartbreaking a little bit. And very close race. I decided to run again in 2019 and became in the middle, became fifth, became number 5 out of 9. Every council was all at large in Lowell, and through I'm trying to think of the terminology. I don't want to use the word lawsuit, so in the city, but through changes in the election system that was pursued by a group of Asian and minorities in the city, that certain neighborhoods in the city they have representation more than other parts than other neighborhoods in the city. So the city was forced to change the election system to hybrid, a combination of district representation, neighborhoods, and some at large. So the first time I ran, I came in 5th place for at large. Then last year, I ran for the district in my neighborhood, which is predominantly Asian. And in my second term, that the public vote for council, but then your colleagues now is made up of 11 councillors now instead of 9. It's increased by 2. And then the councillors would elect as an electoral vote. So my peers elect me to be the mayor, and I was honored. I'm honored every day, and I think it's come through. And I know there's going to be many questions that come follow this that related to it. I felt that I became mayor in a city like Lowell. And Lowell is a very, very special place. I don't think that it would happen in any other part of the country because it's such a diverse city. But I think what the city like Lowell needs to be somebody exactly like me, an Asian American that pretty much understand every side of the community, and that's because of our diverse experience, of our struggle, because of our interest to learn from others. So my colleague felt, no two politicians going to agree, right? So never mind 10 other politicians. So, but they all felt that I could unite not only all the councillors, but I could also unite the city because it was really the first time that the city was fragmented into district representation, and where everyone was used to having everyone represent the entire city. But then again, most of the representation came from one or two same neighborhoods each time. So it was a fragmented elected system. So I think kind of came at the right time being an AAPI representative. Maybe that's too long of an answer.
No, that's a great answer. It's exactly what I was asking about. It's amazing to hear you talk about sort of your experiences with your family, your experiences of violence, your experiences of coming from a very different background from many people here at Harvard, and then coming to Lowell and leading a city that is, as you were saying, many residents, I imagine, see themselves in you as a political leader, and I imagine that's incredible for so many residents of Lowell. You were also talking about how your colleagues on the city council see you as someone who maybe understands a lot of the perspectives in Lowell. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that's affected your way of making policy as a local politician. Have your experiences and your similarities in descriptive sense, but also in terms of the experiences you've had and your family has had, how has that affected some of the ways you make policy in Lowell?
Right, another great question. So let me see if I could understand that question answer in a short way or a shorter way. Every elected official, especially at the local government, my approach is that everybody ran just like I did to represent the entire community, to represent the city. So they do have the best interest of the city in mind and at heart, but I think the way that people try to approach the end goal of the result might be different, and they might have different political experience. They might have different political philosophy, different group of people supporting them. So it really is a very diverse group of representatives we have at City Hall, and also different in terms of age as well. We have some young representative, and we have a person that has been a counselor for about 30 years now with a lot of experience. And this term is the first time that we have an African American city councilor as well in the city of Lowell. And we have, we have females, and in addition to myself, there are two Cambodian American city council. And as the mayor, you also chair the school committee. And on a school committee, there are two other Cambodian school committee members as well. So everybody sort of approached policy in a different way. And again, based on the upbringing or their the communities that they want to represent. So the way I approach it, I try to support policy that's really for the best interest of the city. And once in a while, it might be a unique policy to represent something, but just as long as it's not bad, just as long as it's not harmful, I would try to talk with individual representative myself, see where this is going. This has happened. I understand there's another person on the council that believe it differently, and they're going to push this policy forward. A lot of negotiation. If you support this one policy, you have to support another policy. So because nobody want to have a motion. So the way to get things done as a legislative body, you file a motion. I think some of you might be more representative with what's going on at the legislative body at the Boston State House. To do it through bills. So we do it through motions on the local level. And so nobody want to have the motion or want to have the ideas shut down in public, in the meeting and televised on TV. So we really have to work together to support each other's goal to achieve what they think is best for the city. I think that's the approach, is try to work with everybody. I told them in the beginning, as I try to go on try to earn their vote, I say I will work with each one of them, whether I agree with them or not, but as long as the intention is really for the best interest of the entire city. And bear in mind that Lowell is probably one of the most diverse city in the United States.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of those particular policies or initiatives that you've championed. I know that Lowell is an incredibly diverse city. I imagine it's hard to figure out how to represent the whole city, especially with regards to some of the disagreement you've had to face.
Sure. I think we are very, very concerned at the past, and I think these issues exist before my time. There are a lot of great individuals, a lot of organizations that work on the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion. But I think it came more to the forefront in the past 3 to 4 years. So when I got on, I want to make sure that first of all, City Hall. I don't know if some of you have ever walked into City Hall, and to me, I feel like I'm pretty educated. I've been around, so to speak. Right, I know different type of people. But before I became a public official, I felt intimidated walking to City Hall, right? Because it's just big. You're not familiar of the customs of where to go, which office, which department is here and this, and everyone looked like very, very professional, and they kind of know what they're doing and very stoic. So I really want City Hall to be very welcoming, and one of the things to make it welcoming is really have people that come from our community to be a staff there, to work there. So when they walk in, because Lowell, even though it's a city, it's still a community. So if anyone walk in and they see somebody like their neighbor work there or somebody from the community, right away would put a smile on their face, right? They feel comfortable. If that question, they will approach you, they ask you questions. So one of the first things that we did was to have an HR audit to look at how that the hiring process, the interviewing process, to figure out how many members of the minority groups are in different departments. So after HR audit came back, we worked towards having a DI officer. We create a DI officer position at City Hall. And the third thing was to have training by all the managers, by the management office, the director of each department, from the police department to the finance department to the Department of Public Works to the clerk's office. Everyone has to go through so many number of hours and get credit for DI certification. So all these things are what are the policy that we put in place to make sure that think if you don't ask me how success it has been, that'd be okay. It's a slow process, but I can see the changes now. In the past year, I've seen many more minorities in City Hall, and one of the things that I push for too is public safety. For a city is very, very important. Public safety meaning community policing as well as the firefighters department, because the police is out there in the community all the time. But in the past, the Cambodian immigrants in Lowell, we've been in Lowell for about 40 years, and there has not. So we represent about 25% of just the Cambodia alone represent about 25% of the city. But if you look at the entire AAPI group, it's about 30 to 35%, and we only have about 5 to 6% AAPI police officers. That's one. And the second thing is the first Asian police officer was hired about 30 years ago, and to this date, there has not been one police officer that has been promoted to a ranking like a sergeant or a lieutenant. All still patrol, foot patrol. So that is kind of disheartening because it's like yes, you're welcome to come in, but there's really never an opportunity for advancement. So again, when you're talking about having people that look up like us, to put it simply, it's difficult to have community policing, but you don't have police officers that are understanding of where you came from. And I mentioned earlier, when you came from a war-torn country, a different environment, socioeconomic factor is a big issue, like an urban city like Lowell. So you really need police officers that came from the same background, so they kind of understand like this kid, this person, why they do something. It's and I'm not talking about like major crime, talking about a lot like young kids, misdemeanor, things like that. But the other thing too, you want to get them out of that environment. You want to help them before they get into serious trouble like that. So my other goal is also to make sure that we hire more police officers, more firefighters, just to make sure that the public feels safe and they are part of the community.
That's a really great way of putting it, how people providing public services like public safety, it's really important for them to know what the community needs. So I really appreciate that. That sort of leads to my next question that I had, which was about how you've dealt with some of the disagreement in your city, and how you've, could you maybe just talk a little bit about your approach to building building bridges across communities that maybe disagree in Lowell, and how you've what your approach to maybe forming collaborations and coalitions has been?
I think with a lot of patience. So as mayor, you chaired the meeting, and the power is in the gavel, right? It's in that mallet that you hold, you see on TV, right? So that kind of was I think the past 2-3 weeks. That's all the local news been talked about. The first time I used the gavel when I first got elected, I thought, hey, I'm going to use this. I want to make sure I keep the meeting in order. So there was an argument among members of the representative, and I just want to keep it in line. And one person, I used the gavel, and they get upset. And after the meeting, one person approached me. Oh, great job, Mayor. You did a fantastic job. Thank you for doing that. But it was actually the person that I had intended to use the mallet, to use the gavel against. And a couple of days later, the representative finally called me on the telephone, and they said that I want a few days to think about it. I thought that, saying to me, I thought you're being very disrespectful to use the gavel. I was just trying to share my opinion, what I'm trying to do. I run to represent the city. I have the best interest of the city. And so that person felt bad because they thought I was using the gavel against that person. So it was just the opposite. So I learned that really it's communication, and I let the representative of I just wanted to keep a certain level of respect. They can voice their opinion. They can go back and forth and follow the process. So I sort of allowed that for the members to disagree, but in a public way. But the issues getting, the longer you're in office, the issues become, beginning of might somewhat not that serious, but if the issues continue to exist, it gets more and more heated. And I've been criticized for not using the gavel enough. So, but what they don't, what the public need to know is that, I think from my point of view, a lot of things can get done by talking to the represent themselves. And I understand you want to go this certain path, but it's disagreement. If you're going to keep on fighting each other about who's right, who's wrong, and a local government, especially, it doesn't get resolved. None of the issues will get resolved. We're not going to reach the same path. It's going to just stay there for a while. And I've seen it's going back and forth, the same issues going back and forth. That one motion got passed. The next week, the motion came back on the floor again, worded differently, and then got voted the opposite by different way. And if the motion doesn't get passed, people look for different technicality to see, like, how was it that this motion wasn't passed. So there's a lot of technicality involved. So I think the best way for me being the mayor is really to make sure that I have an open communication with them. And another interesting thing I learned about being the mayor also, a lot of things I learned. I've been a mayor for about a year and 2 months now, so it's been not too long yet. But a mayor is not just the outside, the influence that you might have. But when you are run the meeting, you are not really you're not the master in the committee. You are actually the servant. So once you learn that your role and what needs to be what to get done, I think I feel that I can lead the meetings much more effectively. And to me, uh, it's more important to get the job done, to get things done, whether through communication, whether through relationship building, or through making policies. And if it was through policies, through public policies, I want to make sure that I do in a way that everybody can understand and they can support, and whether they agree with it or not. But I would try to make them see that it is for the best interest of the city, and I will try to get them to support it rather than fight it. I'm okay with changing things. I don't have to change things overnight. I don't feel like I need to win in this meeting, but I do feel like it needs to be achieved in a short period of time.
I wonder how I'm wondering how do you balance that need to sort of listen to the community and hear what people's needs are with this need to sort of maybe educate about what you think is a policy priority or what you think of as the tool to use from government to help sort of meet their needs. How do you balance that?
Well, just like that, the issue of the council, the question's getting harder and harder.
I swear, I'll open it up to students in a second, and they'll only get harder. So,
all right, absolutely. So the question is how do I get the other representative, the council member, the school member to understand what I'm trying to achieve?
well, not just the other council members, but also members of the public. How do you communicate and balance that need to communicate what your priorities are or what you think would work for the city of Lowell with what people sort of express as a need? Do you see this as a need to educate along the way as you tell them what you want to do, or do you see it as more of a reciprocal process? Just kind of curious about your approach to that.
I think sure. I think to answer it in a short way, and this might not be the politically correct way to say it, but I think in our city, and if there's disagreement from some groups, I think because there's a lot of changes going on in our city, and I think some groups want to see the change when things kind of happen the way they want it in the past for so long. And when we have a different approach to achieving things, or when I become more inclusive and try to include different groups and different communities, and to come up with policies that would serve the underprivileged and the underserved community. So I get some challenges from that. So I think when it comes to that, I'm just being honest and just say we need to include this community. We need to provide more service to this neighborhood. So I mean, at a certain point, I think you just have to believe that what you are doing is right, and this is for the best interest of the city. And it might not that particular that one or two requests or motions or negotiation might not benefit the entire city, but you know something, there's 2 or 3 communities here that have never had any good service, have never benefited much from the policy of the entire system. So it's either they come along and support this one, or they're going to be left behind through the changes.
I want to open it up to student questions here because I know that you guys probably have a lot for Mayor Chau. I, of course, could ask questions all day, but their questions will be better and harder. So anyone with questions, please.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for coming to speak with us today. My question is, as you mentioned, there are not so many Asian American politicians, but there are more and more as the time's going on. Are there any Asian American politicians within the U.S. whom you especially admire, whom you look up to as part of your leadership? Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it's a great question, and I'm not by background, I'm not a political person or a political historian, but in my in the present right now, I really like Mayor Wu. So I think she's great. So sometimes you don't have to look for in terms of region or space or time. There's somebody who's immediate and next to you, and I think it's amazing that she got elected in a city like Boston, which is huge compared to my city or many other cities. And it's tough, and she has a different role than mine. That would make it even tougher. So I follow social media, and I really give to her how tough she is, how strong she is, and the way I look at it, and she does it in a nice way too. So you can be tough and do it a nice way. So that's one thing I admire about her.
Hi, Mayor Chau. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. It's fantastic to see representation in a local government. My question speaks to, I think, beyond representation in government, which I think is really important, especially for the AAPI community. When I was growing up, even going through elementary school and middle school, I never saw my face represented in the faces of leadership in my community or in America, really. But like thinking beyond that, how have you navigated thinking more about like systemic change within your position, and what do you think is the role of the AAPI community in enacting that systemic change? For example, just thinking in terms of, instead of pushing for perhaps more representation in institutions that might currently be enacting harm, thinking about really transforming those institutions and using our voices once we get there to be that positive change.
Thank you for that question. That's an excellent question, and there was one word in your question that kind of already answer a lot of the inquiries regarding to the importance of having AAPI representation and also having systemic change, and that is voice. And you are right. I think we can go beyond just having elected AAPI, but I think it's important to have voice. A voice can come from different individuals in different field of work, whether it's healthcare or business or community leadership. Because I think before, I think this is just to put into perspective a little bit. I have spoken more in a public setting in the past 3 years than I ever had in my life, like whether in school or at work. Because I think with the AAPI, I think there's this stereotype, right, that we don't voice our opinion, what's of interest to us, what's important to us. And now by having representation again, and the voice comes from many different fields in our world. So I think it's important for all of us to speak up. If we don't speak up, I think the rest of the community don't know what we're going through. Like many of the struggles, and it could be something as simple of having inclusive languages and at public buildings, in government buildings, at hospitals. Again, if in addition to not having people that from our community working in those settings, but also there's the big language barrier. So I think having voices, I encourage students and everyone all in our field to really speak up, to have a strong voice and let people know, and don't be afraid to be right or wrong. A lot of time we feel that what we're saying may not be as important, or what we're saying might not be the right answer. And I've learned, and speaking with other API elected officials, this really, there might be a wrong answer somewhere, but sometimes it's okay. I was going to say there's no right or wrong answer, but so what if there was a wrong answer? That's the way how we discover ourselves. We have discover other people and interact with each other and have them understand, sometimes through not having the right answer. through having not doing the right things, certain things, that can open doors to possibilities. And maybe one thing I can think of in Lowell, there's a big healthcare disparity because many of the Southeast Asian kind of categories, like Southeast Asian, meaning Cambodian and Laos and Vietnam and formerly known as Burma, we came to the United States because of the war environment, and we live in refugee camps. So now that we're here, we face healthcare issues that were developed when we were younger through the environment, things like that. So there hasn't been a focus on healthcare towards the immigrant groups, and it's only recently, since I've been elected, that I try to approach different leadership in different organizations. Now we begin to focus on some of the important health issues within the immigrant group now. So I think having voices when we speak, and none of us before spoke about healthcare because we're not doctors, we don't have any medical training. So how can we ask anybody about or explain to somebody what our health issues are? Something as important or as simple as hepatitis, right? So over time and through just we're more like letting all this person this problem, this issue, that issue. Now, Law General, which is becoming Taft's healthcare system now, they deal with a program to educate more of the immigrant community. And I'm part of that. I'm part of the discussion, part of the panel discussing, inviting different leadership to come talk about the healthcare. So I think having voice, like you said, beyond elected officials representation is just as important because we need to let people know our struggle, our needs, basically.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. My question is about your discussion earlier of when you ran and you lost that first time. And I'm wondering if you can speak to how you fell forward when you fell publicly in leadership and the impact that that had on you financially and also the way that you were able to connect with voters again that second time around when you did decide to run.
That's a good question, and I'm not quite sure if I understand your question correctly. Um, when you run and you fail, how that affect me personally or the finance and things like. But even I would add on to that, even as an elected official, and I think this is very, very important when minority run for office or when a member of the minority group want to become leaders. I think being a minority is not just so much the color of your skin that gives you the challenge of running for a successful position. There's a whole bunch of things. Your background, also your financial background, because the way we're a minority, it's categorized that way for a certain reason because you don't have, because of socioeconomic status, because of education, because of access to resource, because of networking. So these are the elements that affects minority candidates, and that's what make minority candidates difficult to run for public office. And you're running against somebody that, and this is stereotyping a little bit, somebody that has a bad name because their families, generations of them have been leadership in the city. They've been elected officials generation after generation, in addition to having resources and so forth. So the challenges of the minority is plentiful. It's manifold, all the way from, as you suggested, of finance, connection, access, education, and your support, right? Because when you are struggling to survive, when you're struggling to succeed, guess what? Because of the environment you came from, so are your peers, so are your neighbors, right? So are your friends and family members. So many things that you have to overcome to enter an environment like political. And I would have to say that probably extend to many other areas of what you consider like successful position as well. So I think that that's a great question, really, that just touch upon what it means to be a minority, what it means to be a minority and to step up, to become a leader. We have many, many more challenges than it's not just academics, it's not just intellect. You can talk good, you can be understanding of the world, can connect with people, but there's already certain things that are working against you already just because where you came from. Thank you for that question.
I guess I have one final question because we only have about 5 minutes left. But I'm going to ask this, and people can stick around too if you have more. But what message would you sort of have for aspiring young leaders who maybe are considering a career in public service, especially for the young AAPI individuals who are considering a career in public service?
I think that's a great question as a way to end this panel, because my much is really not now is the time. And I don't think that there's a better time for any member of the AAPI to run for office. Myself, I was surprised when I ran for council. Again, because my background is not political. When I start to run, I began to see that so many other members in the Asian community just step forward and they thank me and say thank you for running. It's about time. I wish I can do it. So and that's going back to maybe voice again. Sometimes we don't share ideas with each other enough. We need to talk more. We need to communicate more. We need to get together like this and with the AAPI, different organizations across the state and the country. I don't think there's a better time for an Asian American Pacific Islanders to run for office. It's really needed. I think our group stands ready to support the young people to step up.
Thank you so much, Mayor Chau. This is really inspiring.
Thank you. If I could ask one question, and anybody can answer me. Just what are your interests? Anybody have any political aspiration to run for office, or what is anybody's goal? Just anybody can answer.